we'll go ahead and get started. I want to again thank you for logging in, and I want to welcome you to the second part of a two-part series of webinars hosted by Creative Circle. I'm Adam Bleibtreu, and I'm the Chief Marketing Officer here at Creative Circle. Our goal with these webinars is to provide some insight and information to you in an online environment. Today's webinar is a presentation about building, engaging, and managing remote teams, a topic that we thought would be exceptionally helpful in today's new working world. I want to go over a few housekeeping things before we get started. First of all, at the bottom of your Zoom window, you'll see a chat icon. If you click on it, you can post us questions in real time. Time permitting, we'll get to some of them today, but I assure you we will get to all of them and get answers back to you before we wrap this series up. Next, this is the second of a two-part series. We do hope that you enjoyed Tuesday's presentation and will enjoy today's. If you're just joining on for today's, don't worry. The presentations done Tuesday and the one done today will be hosted on a landing page. For all participants in this webinar, you will receive an email with a link to that landing page at the end of today's webinar. It will allow you to view both the presentation and to download the videos of each of the two webinars. So with that out of the way, I'd like to get to the fun part of the day, which is introducing our presenter, Robert Rose. For the past 20 years, Robert has been a troublemaker, words that he uses that I completely concur with. Truth be told, Robert has been consulting and advising companies on their marketing strategies and how to become effective storytellers for easily the last 15 and 20 years. He's also been leading and managing remote teams for at least 15 of those years, which in my mind makes him an expert on the things that I want to understand most in today's new marketing world. So with that said, Robert, I'm going to stop talking and let you take over and run us through today's presentation. Thank you so much for being a part of it today.
Oh, it's absolutely my pleasure, Adam. And you know, it's a shame that we didn't get to see your fancy backgrounds. Maybe we'll do that in Q&A because you have mastered the Zoom. Oh, see, there he is, right there. He has mastered the Zoom and the fancy backgrounds of Zoom. So that's something that I haven't even mastered yet. So I'm particularly jealous of what he's been able to do there. Thank you all very much for joining today. And yes, I'm hopeful that you were able to join the first part. If not, certainly, yes, we'll have the recording available. And I'm going to take myself off of video just while we go through the slides so that you don't have to look at my ugly mug as we go through this. And so one of the other quick housekeeping tips I wanted to just tell you is, as we go through this, the slides are going to advance automatically. So it's a lean back experience, as you might expect. And certainly, as we just talked about, we're going to get you an archive and a streaming version of this event in your inbox very, very quickly. And we will answer all the questions, certainly in writing if we don't get to all of them today. And so, yeah, welcome to part two. So in part one, on Tuesday, we talked through some of the early stages of building and establishing this remote team. And we talked about how this is a different time. It's not the remote work that so many of us have been either working toward or even doing since the advancement of all of these digital technologies over the last 10 years. It's a different time. And I do hope that all of you are staying safe, staying sane, in all of these things, because it's not just the morning emails and the team conference call from home and then coming into the office or jumping online in the evening after a long day and checking up on emails. This is where everybody, including you as a team leader, are working remotely from home and in a situation where, quite frankly, your spouses are home, your kids are home, you may or may not have the infrastructure to accommodate all of this. I was just talking with a colleague the other day who works in New York, and he's in a studio apartment and has converted his bathroom into a studio where he can do remote calls. So we talked about this idea and how to be proactively transparent in this new world that we find ourselves in, how we can establish training for newly remote teams on the technologies as well as behaviors and patterns of working from home. We talked a little bit about maintaining that hierarchy and the relationships of the existing structure, about how on the internet, everybody's avatar is the same size. So it can be really tempting to want to include everybody, including senior leadership, in every conversation. But also how we actually maintain all of that and establish new, iterative, more frequent workflows and check-ins, and how that's a good idea. We also talked about how in the early days, you want to be mindful of setting really clear rules of the road. We're going to talk a little more about that in just a moment. And or setting up flexibilities with your teams, your times, the patterns in which they work, and monitoring those patterns as they start to adjust themselves and being able to take advantage of them where you can. Time zone advantages, taking advantage of people's work patterns. They may work better at night. They may, make adjustments because of their families. And that can work in your favor in many ways. But also caring certainly, and certainly for those of you who are under the constraints of working hourly and those kinds of things, but caring a little less about the 9 to 5 sort of classic in at breakfast, out at dinner paradigm, and starting to think about the flow and production of good work. And of course, we finished off, and we'll talk a little more today, certainly about the tech stack, about some of the technologies that you're going to want to establish for these new and remote teams, and how you'll want to be careful of your team's capabilities in using those things. And today we'll continue that. We're going to talk about the longer term operations of virtual teams, keeping them engaged, and the tools and the technologies that might help you engage everybody, keep them engaged, and ultimately create an environment that, quite frankly, is really set for expansive success. I think coming out of what we're coming out of right now, I think we'll all agree that we will be changed. I happen to believe we're going to be changed for the positive. I think this is a new way of accelerating something that was already happening. And so I think in many ways, the changes that are going to come out of this are going to be good for us as we both look to go back to physical events, physical work together, but also really enhance our abilities to address remote management. So let's get going. And we'll start with something that is virtual leaders, virtual team managers, that we're going to need to realize as soon as we get into this early flow of the management as it starts to really happen. And that is, what happens at work doesn't usually happen, quite frankly, because you're at work. So chances are, even a month ago or though, if you were working in a central office, climbing into a building every day, and you asked your teammates, you asked your folks that work there, how do you really get work done? You usually get a soft laugh, and somebody will say something like, oh, I come in early. That's when I get my real work done. Or I stay a bit late after all the meetings. Or, you know what, I have to schedule time in my Outlook calendar so that nobody bothers me, and so that I actually schedule time with my door closed so that I can actually get work done. So much of the physical life of work has become back-to-back meetings. So many of my clients, they run creative and marketing teams at companies. Their life, quite frankly, is simply going from meeting to meeting to meeting and trying to get any work done in between those times. That 1 hour meeting that you go to and it hopefully adjourns after like 35 minutes, and the host says something like, I'm going to give you some of your day back. And you're like, no, time is not like an escrow deposit. You shouldn't have taken it from me in the first place. So we know that intellectually, meaningful work takes good, uninterrupted time. But where does that happen? So often these days, it's happening, quite frankly, at home. It's one of the reasons, quite frankly, that remote work has become so popular. It's so not uncommon for me to hear from my clients who've been fighting for remote work capabilities to do so because they can actually get the work done at home. In other words, the physical office has in many ways become this work blender, blending us into meetings and institutionalized cake celebrations and raiding the conference room for meeting leftover food and more meetings, et cetera, et cetera. So should we expect that once we get into this flow of remote work and our team's virtual, and we'll find all that Zen space that we've been seeking, and we'll have uninterrupted workspace and we'll be able to no, not in our experience, not in our 10 years of work here. In fact, it can get a lot worse. The trap that many new remote teams get into, especially if you follow the advice of more communications, more frequent check-ins, all the things that we talked about on Tuesday, is that they just add to the existing meetings that we try and physically lift out of the old environment. In other words, what I mean there is, if you're sitting back in back meetings and Now you've added the chore and you've pulled that out of the physical space, and all those meetings you just keep on the books, but you just make them virtual. And now simultaneously you have to answer chats and Slack messages and emails while you're in those meetings. It's just going to get a whole lot worse. So the long-term health and productivity of your remote team is definitely not in lifting the same structure as before and making it all just virtual. It's rather creating those tools that we talked about in part one, those frequent iterative check-ins and new workflows for you as a leader to set your team on the right foot. And then some of the tools that can help you space those things out, build in some of the white space and breathing room so that people can take a breath and get more engaged and get really excited about the deep and wonderful work that they're going to do. So let's look at those. Let's look at those specific tools that we've found to be really super helpful in this new age. So as we talked about in the last webinar, the main thing that a great virtual team lead has is great communication. So for the Jerry Maguires out there, and you know who I'm talking about, right? You know, the ones who just need to get into the room. And once you get into the room, you sort of got it sorted. You know, you had me at hello. That's where communication comes naturally. This may be an easier transition for you, but for those of you where communication is, you know, a little tougher, you're introverted a little bit, it might be more of a struggle. You're going to want to put some extra effort into developing good communication relationships with all the members of your team. So those one-on-ones, really important. These sort of communication skills, really important. And so the tools that we'll talk about today, and all of the ones really that I think are the most useful, are the ones that remove friction from communication. This is going to be the biggest ongoing challenge with leading a remote team. So any tool you come up with that we suggest that maybe you find out there on the World Wide Web, really including all those are going to be what keeps teams engaged and productive and as conflict-free as possible. So we'll talk through 5 here, just in the sake of time. So we'll talk about the writing and communication, the visual task board, semi-regular reflection meetings, personal socialization events, and the team charters, how we'll finish up. So let's look at each one of these in turn, because I think each one may help you in different ways. So first one, number 1, writing books and classes. Yep, really. I really mean it. And it sounds weird, and I don't mean to say that everybody on your team has to be Hemingway or Shakespeare or anything, but it's to say that so much of what is going to be done in this new environment is going to be done collaboratively, shared via written communications. I have seen so much time and engagement wasted because somebody at 3 o'clock in the afternoon on the West Coast shares feedback or instructions to somebody on the East Coast where it's 6 p.m. and it's missing things, it's unclear, it's structured in a weird way. And so it quite frankly makes the action undoable when that person comes into work the next morning. So the person then sends back a question early in the morning when they get up saying, what did you mean here? And that person, of course, doesn't see it until they wake up and get into their work, but before they get it, they go, well, this is what I meant. And that game of sort of weird telephone can happen back and forth. And because it'll make you lose hours, if not days, of productivity. So get some training on written communication. Have everybody at least go through the exercise. And if you haven't seen it, it's a wonderful exercise for your kids, by the way, something fun for you to do at home with the kids, which is how to make a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. There's a link to it in this. And by the way, all the links that we put in the presentation are not affiliate links. They're nothing like that. They're just links to hopefully good tools and useful things that you might find useful in setting up your strategies. We've also included some of our favorites here, and these are all books that we've just found invaluable in our work in virtual teams. They include some favorites like Everybody Writes by Ann Hanley, the Harvard Business Review to Better Business Writing, of course, 2 classics, How to Win Friends and Influence People. By the way, that link goes to the sort of updated version for digital communications, and The Elements of Style, of course. So great, wonderful things. And yes, send these books to your team. Get them to read. Have everybody do the make a peanut butter and jelly exercise. Really fun. And that brings us to the second one, which is what we call the visual task board. Now, so many of you may practice new agile-oriented workflows already. And in fact, in the chat, as I was watching the chat in the last webinar, I saw the idea of the Kanban board go on, and it's just a wonderful thing. But even if you're not following Agile, if you're still in some other workflow, if you're just beginning to explore Agile methodologies, the idea of the Kanban board can really be helpful as a communication tool, not even only as an Agile workflow mode, but also as a communication tool about how and where everybody is in the status of tasks and projects. The key to a great visual task board is A, simplicity. It's something that provides only the essential information that's needed and removes anything that might be confusing about the status or where things are. B, simplicity again. If there are lots and lots of projects going on, categorize them in multiple Kanban boards so that people can get to them quickly. It's about communicating status and communicating where things are with the project or the task, not getting into the details of the challenges that are going on with a particular project. Or C, close to delivery. In other words, where are we? Where are we and how close are we to getting finished where this is? These project management communication charts can just be a great visual way for the team to know at a click, at a glance, where everybody is on a particular status, a particular project, or a particular task. Also, you can add, if you find it valuable, and we do, create a regular method to communicate status on projects in your all-team calls. So for example, in your regular all-team meeting, you might have a round-the-horn update on projects. The key here is not to get into the details, that these are updates, not to get into the challenge of any project and not go into any rat holes. They should be kind of a red light, yellow light, green light status of 1, are things on track? 2, what's in my way, if anything? And 3, do I need help? And 4, am I requesting help at this time? That's it. That should be it. And keep them very short and succinct, because that enables you as a team lead to start to identify those things that need to be taken offline, that can be handled in another work stream, or that needs to be managed, and keeps the team moving along so that everybody's not getting bored following some project down the rat hole. This is not the time to solve it. It's just the time to communicate where things are. And that brings us to the next one. Oh, one of the things I wanted to bring up here is we've also provided some helpful resources here as well. There are technology resources, which we'll duplicate again when we get to the whole technology section. But these are specific Kanban board solutions that you may want to explore, as well as some great books on Kanban and visualizing those as well. And that brings us to our next one, which is what we call the reflection meeting. And it's semi-regular. This is, I have to tell you, one of the most productive meetings and one of my favorite meetings that we've set up in all of our virtual team management methodologies. We do it once a month. And what we do is we call it the reflections meeting. By the way, this can be a great collaboration kickoff for, like, you know, your wine tasting or something like that, for something fun, which I'll talk about in just a minute. But reflection meetings are where we get the team together, and it's not status on projects. It's not status on where people are on everything, but it's just designed to do 4 things really quickly. So what we do is we go around to each one of us, and each one of us, 1, names something that's going really well, celebrating something that's going really, really well. 2, asks about something, and it's key, asking about something that they feel might have gone better. This isn't to say where I failed or where there's a failure in the process or anything like that. It's to say, hey, I might ask if things about this might have gone a little better, or this project might have gone a little better. It's a question, and not about a person. It's not about throwing somebody under the bus, but it's about asking if something might have gone better, so that you as a team lead can start to identify those things. 3, they ask a question about something. It could be a question about a cross-functional team that they don't really have any visibility into. It could be a question about a project that they're confused about. It could be a question about somebody's dog. It can be just a question that they have on their minds. And 4, thanking someone, having gratitude for someone that has done something for them in the last week or month, or whatever your cadence is for these things, that went above and beyond what they would normally have done as part of a project or something else. And this can be a great output. And we really do recommend making it an output, whether it's sort of a summation of a newsletter, a communication to the rest of the company. And basically the output becomes something really neat, because it ends up being, here's what is working really well. Here's what we're working on currently. Here's questions we're asking as a team. And basically, here's the ones that we have gratitude for right now. And a wonderful way to not only get your team communicating, but get your team communicating with the other teams that may be larger in your business. And as I mentioned, a great way to kick off a socialization thing. And that's our fourth one, which is making time for the connections. I just did ours last night. We did our connections it was yesterday afternoon for me and evening for the folks on the East Coast. And it was basically just to get together and say, hey, have we actually figured out the backgrounds in Zoom? What wine are we drinking? What are we all doing? Things are going? These are the things that we can draw on from the physical environment, the socialization that's so important. High Five Friday, Wine Wednesday, happy hour every day. You can see a theme working for me here. Whatever floats your boat, big project launch Monday, whatever the things, all these things can be done virtually too. One of the things that I think is so important, and this is something we did, is if you plan them in advance, you can actually get stuff shipped to your teammates, like a wine delivery. So you're all drinking the same bottle of wine, or food, or puzzles, or something like that. I shipped out hats, funny hats to my team so that we would all have to wear funny hats because I'm trying to get them all into using video more often. And that is a really fun way to sort of just have a socialization in your meetings as well. And the last one that we'll cover here is what we call the team charter. And I had mentioned this in the first webinar where I talked about getting ground rules, setting boundaries, looking for those patterns, and setting expectations with your team in a written form. Now, I don't mean to go all like Sheldon Cooper here and Big Bang Theory contracts and roommate agreements. And you don't have to, this is not meant to be sort of a contract. But the idea is that it is a compact with your team, right? It's something that gets your team together in a documented set of behaviors. Particularly useful if you're going to have new people coming on that need to come acclimated to the actual team very, very quickly here. So they're just meant to set the behaviors and expectations, set the ideas, what information will be shared in what technology, how is it shared, how do we operate, what are our regular team meetings, when is the team happy hour. All of those things can be a nice documented way to say, this is what you can expect and this is what we all agree to as being part of this team. And of course, that brings us to our next piece, which is the tools. So the technologies for remote teams. And again, I touched a bit on this, and I just wanted to go a little bit more in depth here to close things out about the approach of technology. So there are a number of technologies that are going to be important to you as you manage your remote team. And as I mentioned before, you may already be working with your IT team or a consultant on getting these set up or vetted or whatever. But if it's possible, I want you to think about going through at least a light set of requirements gathering that can help you select the right technology. There's some benefits here. Getting a requirements gathering process in order will get your users, get the people that are going to use the technology, their business needs met, and you'll select a technology that fits in better with the overall landscape plan for your company. 2, it's going to help you drive this management change process, this new thing that you're creating. Don't just go out and say, send me all your list of features and functionality and then use that. It's about understanding what's important. What is the user's needs and wants when it comes to a new technology? It's a great opportunity to connect with the broader organization, to get the associated processes prioritized, skill sets, the governance, all of those things around the right kind of technology. So you're not just buying some slick new killer solution because everybody thinks it's the awesomest, but rather selecting the right technology because it's going to help you do things in the easiest, most simple way. And on that point, it obviously helps you reduce the risk of over or under buying technology. So the requirements gathering process can really help you surface and identify those gaps into what's being done today to figure it out. So just for your use, and I promise this is really wordy and I'm not going to read the whole thing here. I just wanted to have it for your downloading purposes. These are our 7 steps to happier tech usage. And basically, and again, this doesn't have to be a months-long process. You can literally do this in a few hours for some of the technologies that you'll be looking at. But just go through these 7 steps and ask these questions, and I think you'll be a lot happier with the technology that you select. So, for example, number 1, validate the need. Do we need this? Do we need it now? What would we do if we didn't have this technology? Is this a showstopper, or can we operate around this for the moment? And most importantly, what goal does it align with? Because if the technology doesn't help you align to some goal that your team has, you really need to second guess yourself about what it is you actually need with this technology. 2, now compile your requirements. Gather all those needs and wants from your team as a team and start to ask questions about what features do we need? Is it going to go from a handful of users to the entire company? Is it going to go from the company to a handful of users? What business functions is it going to support? What other systems does it need to work with? All of those kinds of things. Gather those in a big list. Then 3, and this is maybe the most important one, and it's the reason we put it at the heart of the process, is determine what we call focal needs. Focal needs are your particular needs as a team. Prioritize those requirements and determine which ones actually are your needs. There are 2 characteristics to focal needs. 1, they are idiosyncratic, meaning the need is unique to your team. And I mean that on both sides. Maybe it's a need for scale, but it may also be a need for, you know what, we're never going to have more than 2 or 3 people on this thing at any one time. That is unique to our needs. We don't need this huge conferencing system. And then 2, they're really high priority. They support something that's uniquely important to your team, or uniquely unimportant to be able to say they're not a focal need. And so asking yourselves which features rather support our unique needs, which aspects of this technology will be important for our success. Then 4, create your shortlist. If it's any more than 2 or 3 long, you probably haven't really explored your focal needs well. But 2 or 3 solutions will probably start to emerge as the ones that look the best. Look at those differences between the focal needs, which solutions are differentiated because of it. And then 5, that's when you'll conduct your deeper research into each one of these, right? Look at the shortlisted solutions, get demos if they're bigger solutions, look at the websites if they're just, simpler solutions, get a comparison going with you and your team here. Ask other users if they're happy with it. Ask your pals, ask other people which ones appear to be most financially viable in this day and age, which ones are likely to have a large base of support and usage, et cetera. Then, if it's a bigger solution, that's where you may need to conduct an RFP for something. If it's a smaller transactional-based technology solution, this is where you get your, the price on how many users, what you're going to need, what's the monthly cost, what's the support, what do upgrade cycles look like, et cetera. And then lastly, make your selection. Select it and began the implementation. And then, yes, I'm going to say it again. You've heard me say it a lot. Training. Get people really used to it. No matter how small you think the technology is, plan for some training for you can start quickly using that. So we've assembled, as I mentioned, a toolkit for you for some of the different shared technologies that are really popular. I can tell you, I've missed a few here. These are the ones that we have used and are familiar with, and so we know are decent in what they do. Your mileage will definitely vary with some of them. And I want you to use this toolbox if it's useful for you to sort of click through, starting your process to select the right technology across the different applications that might be useful for you. I'm so happy that you're here. I'm so happy, and I'm really hopeful that this is a useful toolkit for you as you start your adventure in remote team management. I hope you've enjoyed both parts of this. I'm so very happy to take your questions now and really talk about anything from part 1 or part 2. Thanks so much.
Robert, thank you. Thank you so much for really providing a tremendous amount of information that is both incredibly helpful and insightful. Your years of experience are showing through in how you presented the information in some ways that even an old dinosaur like me can digest it. So I appreciate that. And I'll give you my virtual background. There you go. Couple of questions that came through while you were chatting. One of them is, Are there products that higher education can use to utilize and host virtual events? You know, like a portfolio night. Anything that comes to top of mind for you?
I'm sorry, read the question again. I missed the middle part of that.
A person's asking about a technology to host a portfolio night. Let's say it's a school or a college, and you wanted to be able to host portfolios in a virtual environment.
Ah, yeah, I have just started exploring. So one of the things that's really interesting about Zoom, and I'm sure there are many others that do this as well, but Zoom, you can actually do breakout sessions. You can actually have a collective room where everybody gathers, and then you can actually put people into separate classrooms if you want, where then people can sort of take over and or move between classrooms. It's a pretty cool feature that not a lot of people know about or explore. So maybe that's a way that you can start to set up sort of a virtual. I know some virtual events are really looking at this for sort of keynote sessions and then being able to take them out into breakouts. I'm hopeful that that's what was meant by the question.
Yeah, that's great. And when this is over, you're going to tutor me personally on that one. A couple of tips around onboarding new remote team members.
Yeah, the first tip is I would definitely look at creating your team charter, because that can become a welcome kit for new people as they come in. One of the things that we often get when we're a new employee or a new team member into our work environment is that sort of welcome kit of saying, here's where the copy machine is, here's where the local lunch places are, here's all the, here's your desk, here's the way your 401k works, all that stuff that you get as sort of a welcome folder. And we can do the same thing at a more micro or macro, if it is, but a more micro level when new people are coming into the team. And the team charter is a great vehicle for that, which is welcome to the team. Here's the technologies. Here's what you can expect for your hardware. We're going to ship you a laptop. We're going to work with you to get your cell phone coverage plan, or whatever those things are, from what they can expect from not only the corporate, sort of side of things, the business side of things, to get them onboarded as an employee, but more specifically, what they need to get really onboarded as a team member. One of the things that I like to do is what I call sort of bullseye conversations, which is the first day, have them meet immediately with the people that are centermost in in what they're going to be doing, the people they're going to be working with every day. Just literally as a get to know you interview, look at the Kanban board, look what's going on, do one-on-ones with those people. And then maybe a week later, do a circle out with all of the people that may be related to what they do, but they won't be working on a day-to-day basis. And then a circle out from there a week later. So it becomes sort of a 30-day process of being able to say, we're going to start with what gets you acclimated the quickest into your day-to-day work. We're going to introduce you to the people that you're going to relate to, and then ultimately introduce you to the people that you may only see once a quarter, or quite frankly, only ever, exchange emails with, et cetera. So that team charter can be a great vehicle for a lot of things. And then a series of one-on-ones can help them get acclimated over the next 30 days.
Great. Thank you very much. I want to remind those that are still listening in, the entire webinar was recorded and will be available on the landing page, as will Robert's presentations, both part 1 and part 2. You'll receive a link shortly via email and give you access instructions to that. 2 more questions. The next one I think is fascinating. Jeff is asking about, what shift do you expect to see in remote work after COVID-19 passes? What lasting imprint does this have on our work world?
It's a great question, Jeff. It's a wonderful, wonderful question. It's a difficult one right now because I think everybody's head is so swimming with everything that's going on. I'll give you my take, and it is just that. I have no data or anything to back this up, but my take on the changes that are going to be lasting here. One, I think you're going to start to see a lot broader acceptance of permanent remote work. As I mentioned in the first webinar, one of the things that has really been interesting to me is how cooled off remote work was over the last couple of years, because of things like WeWork, because of things like remote offices, and because, quite frankly, people were getting together to work in cool offices, and notwithstanding the trends that had happened with Yahoo and IBM and some of the other larger companies that had sort of, put a bucket of cold water on some of that. I think for full-time remote teams, you're going to see that's one changing. I don't see ever going back to the way it was. I think remote full-time teams, you're going to see a real acceptance of, because I think what you're going to see is that companies are going to see that it actually was quite effective. It actually was quite efficient to be able to do work in this way. And I think it's a proving ground. And I think you're going to see a lot higher levels of acceptance of it coming out of that. Having said that, I think the flip side of that coin is you're going to see a lot of teams, the work really come under a lot more scrutiny. There is this perception out in the world, regardless of what happens, is that the work isn't as good when you do it in a remote setting. And this is true, by the way, of even events, right? Speakers that do speaking events, you'll say, oh, if you do a keynote in person or a workshop in person, you're going to get X amount of dollars, or we're going to pay this. And if you do it online through a webinar or something like that, it should be worth something less than that. And that shouldn't be true. The value of our work that we do in a remote environment is not set by the medium. And we just need to think about how the new medium is going to affect how we deliver the work, and which is just as valuable. And I think one of the things that will take some serious adjustment and will be a lasting impression here will be the need to up our level of how we do digital and remote work. And what I mean by that is, think about the way that we looked at websites in 2002, 2003, 2004. They were literally just, sort of static signposts on the information superhighway. And we've come a long way since then, from e-commerce to social to how we view digital and the interaction of digital. The same thing, I think, is going to come true in a much more condensed time frame this year and perhaps next, as we really learn how to sort of take our digital event, digital meeting, digital and remote work to the next level. And really, everything from virtual whiteboarding to, working together on documents, to all of those things, I think are, necessity is the mother of invention. And I think you're going to see some cool companies come out of this, startups, and you're going to see some cool new work product come out of this as well.
Right. For what it's worth, I've got a straw poll of 5 or 6 people that I'm connected to professionally. And one of the common threads is the remote work process will work for some, but as you said, the flip side of the coin is there are a shockingly large number of people that have discovered the grass is not greener on the other side of the lawn.
Yes.
And they're looking around going, wow, I miss people and I'm not as productive at home. So I'm with you. I think the jury is out, so to speak, on either side.
I mean, I'll tell you, one of the things that's a trend that definitely I see happening is that this is, for event companies are a great example of this, who are now, there's been this sort of move to, okay, we're going to move this to a digital conference or a digital event. And what most of the larger event companies are taking this as a sign is they're going to start hybrids. So many of those physical conferences that you would have normally gone to are going to start to offer, many more of them are going to start to offer both. Because quite frankly, in the fall of winter, where I think we will be back to some level of normalcy, there are still going to be a lot of travel restrictions and travel bans at the corporate level. And so having those people be able to attend those physical conferences, additionally to go to the event, the digital version of that event, will be more commonplace. And so I think you'll see that in remote work too, where it won't be an either or, it'll be how do we integrate them better together.
Right. Great short question here, and then we'll get to one more, is how would you suggest sharing information like this up the corporate ladder? How would you broach the topic so that you could get in front of your CEO with a lot of this content?
I'm assuming by this you mean the sort of remote work thing, which is, of course,
Yes.
I'm sure the answer to that is, these days it's not that hard to get their attention because it's kind of a necessity. But, in terms of how to get this content in front of them, I think the key is, not to put too fine a point on it, but, online webinars and events like this that Creative Circle has been so great in hosting, which is being able to say, here's a 30-minute event. It's really short. Here's a deliverable that came out of it. this is something that really is affecting us, and it is something that we need to get our arms around in terms of how we're going to manage the costs, how we're going to manage the people, and how we're going to, do business continuity in this new world.
Great. Last question, and again, I appreciate everybody that's hanging on to hear this last part. All of this will, of course, be posted on the landing page that you can download. We've all suddenly woke up on a Tuesday morning and found ourselves and our teams working remotely. If you could pull the proverbial 3 bullet points out of your archive and say, for those that are unprepared, have no strategy set out, and had no warning that this was coming, what would be the 3 most important things to focus on for the first 2 or 3 weeks that your team is remote?
Number 1 would be making sure they're all okay. That's my first job. The first thing that happened that I did, and we're a team that works remotely. Number 1 thing I did was made sure that I visually saw, and to the extent I could, to the extent that one of my team members doesn't have a camera set up yet, and make sure that I called and talked to them and get everybody sort of aligned on where they are as a person, beyond the company, and start to just let everybody know that basically we're working on getting this into a much better cadence. In other words, we're working on making this a new way of operating, a new way of working, and stay tuned for that. And frequently, and making sure that you're doing that communication frequently. Number 2 is that I would make sure that if I'm the business owner, or if I report to the business owner or a senior level manager, I'm understanding very, very quickly what our strategy is here. If it's not being set very well, I'm helping to set it, and I'm making sure that we're taking care of all the things that we need to take care of in order to facilitate this new work stream. That includes the technology, that includes the tools, that includes the ability to start to spend some money on some things that I need to spend money on, and maybe divert some money that I had planned to do elsewhere to address this. And number 3, I'm starting very quickly to attend webinars like these to understand what my options are for technologies that I wanted to get implemented very, very quickly, and where the skill sets of my team are, so that I can start facilitating some of these things, as because obviously some of it needs to be done in triage mode, which quite frankly can be done in using the tools that we have, email and phone and cell phone, et cetera. But some of the things like document collaboration, how we're handling security, how we're handling, logging into the corporate servers and all of that. Those are the things that I need to get really squared away quickly, because those are the things that are going to prevent my team from actually moving forward.
Great. Really, really appreciate your answers. And again, Robert, on behalf of Creative Circle and the folks that are on the webinar and have attended, really appreciate your wisdom and your expertise, and a beautiful way of presenting a lot of information.
Absolutely my pleasure. It's been a pleasure to be here, and I wish you all a safe and sane week.
Thank you so much. And again, all participants will get an email following up that will give you access to the presentation and the recordings. I wish you all a productive week. Let's stay healthy and let's stay safe. Thank you very much.